We've talked quite a bit about perception on this channel in previous videos about the things that we put out there with our content and the ways that we want to approach our outreach, emails, etc., and ways that business owners can sometimes accidentally alienate themselves or the client and really burn opportunity. And one that I really wanted to talk about today, because it was something that came up in the last few days for me, is how we handle invoicing and fees and just the timing of all of that, the accidental perceptions that we can create, especially so often this is the case where one action in isolation might not be that big of a deal, but when it occurs alongside two or three other things in a very narrow span of time, it starts to feel like a pattern that really can change the perception somebody has of our business. So let's unpack it. I had a project recently that I had outsourced to some other writers to help me with it, and they took up until the very last minute of the deadline to deliver the writing and had invited, if you've got comments or changes you need to make, let us know. Indeed, I did. They sent the invoice at the same time that they delivered it, which that in itself is fine, but the invoice had a same day due date. Now, in my opinion, a lot of these will just be my opinions. I'm not trying to act like this is the rule that you have to follow in business, but to me, it's bad form to send an invoice in the middle of the afternoon with a same day due date, if for no other reason than if it's 2 p.m, you've only really given this person 3 hours to find your email, turn immediately around and pay it. You don't know if they have calls and meetings and other deadlines of their own that they have to hit. There's really no guarantee that they're going to be able to just snap to and pay the invoice immediately that day. And now if they can't, or they didn't even notice that email, now they're delinquent. That's questionable, especially when you're the one who took up until the very end of the deadline. And then when somebody is paying for content, if there are a lot of edits, it becomes further strange when they're like, okay, well, give us a few days and we'll make the edits, but the invoice is still due today, because then the person in my position is like, so as far as I'm concerned, I don't even have a finished product that I can use and I have to pay for it. What is your incentive after you've been paid to really take the time and make those quality edits? Like, I feel like strategically I've got to hold this invoice a little bit just to make sure that it's delivered. And I feel that's fair, because I certainly wouldn't go to my own clients and say, well, I'm halfway through your SEO for the month, but and I'll finish it late at some other point. But anyway, the money. I mean, it would come off just as weird as that if I started doing that. Another thing I noticed from that same situation is when they had sent the invoice, there was a nearly 4% processing fee attached to it that they were asking me to pay for. And ultimately, the amount that became wasn't super high. So in a way, you could look at someone in my position and say, whatever, just pay it, don't say anything about it. But I struggled with that for a minute, because as somebody who also offers credit card processing to my own clients for how they can pay me, this has always just been a cost of doing business. You don't make other people pay your credit card fees. That's a business expense of yours that you log and you account for. That's the cost of doing business. I would be afraid it would make me look cheap if I started doing that, especially with clients when we're talking larger transactions. If they're paying me over $1,000, I don't want to basically say to them, in addition to all this money you're paying me, I want you to pay the cost of taking your wife out to dinner to settle this invoice, in addition to the amount that we said, especially when that wasn't said up front. If it wasn't part of the negotiation when we were talking numbers, oh, and by the way, there's going to be this % on top of that. If that was never discussed, that just comes off as we, had a gentleman's agreement, we handshook on a certain amount, and then at the end, you're sneaking in like, oh yeah, and there's also this little fee. Even when it's not a lot, it sends a message. Think about the fact that retail stores a number of years ago would often have separate prices, a cash price and then a credit card price. And the credit card price would be a little bit higher than the cash price to incentivize people to use cash. You might still see that occasionally from time to time in places, but largely you don't see it. Why don't you see it? Because retailers began to get wise to, oh, this makes me look cheap, because if I have to charge you 10 cents extra for an orange because you're paying with a debit card or something, it makes me look kind of crappy. People would look at that grocery store and say, geez, you're not doing well enough that you have to cry over 10 cents? Exactly. And so they stopped doing it. And so if you look at that in business as a whole, you as a business owner can acknowledge the same thing and say, I could say, why would I want to pay for that fee? I'm going to pass that on to my client. But all things have consequences. And just speaking from my own experience, my own opinion, yeah, in a way, it does suck for me to have credit card fees that I'm losing out of each invoice that I send out, should they pay that way. But I will gladly pay it because that's a choice I've made. I'm not expecting my customers to pay for choices that I've made. I'm choosing to use Square or use whatever other system I want to invoice people with. I know as I do that, that's going to involve credit fees. The comparative cost in my mind of me looking cheap or like I don't have control of my stuff, that I've got to quibble over a few dollars and make it their problem, that to me, I don't know, I can't point at that and say a dollar figure of like how costly that is. I just know in my mind it's too much. Pay the fee. Relatedly, another example of that I've encountered with somebody is there was a business that had like a set fee for landscaping services and things like that. And they had announced at one point that they were arbitrarily going up a not inconsiderable amount on their rates. And the reason they openly gave was, we want to start donating a portion of our proceeds to this one nonprofit that's really worthy. And they went on this long tirade about how great the nonprofit is. And I felt kind of conflicted about that, seeing it, because I'm like, look, on one hand, that nonprofit does sound great. Kudos to you for being a business who says you want to donate a portion of your proceeds to, sow into the community. That's all admirable. But it comes off as weird when you're saying to your customers, I'm going to charge you 25% more on your invoices to account for that. No, that's your choice that you wanted to donate to this company. You do it. You come up with whatever you can afford to lose out of these invoices and do that. To openly pass that along to your customers, what if the customer is like, look, no offense to them, but I don't want to donate. Can I just pay the normal fee? And obviously you're going to say no. Now they're going to feel weird that they're arbitrarily paying 25% more for something they don't care about, and you're making it their problem. That just seems like a really backward business practice to me. And if you're in a highly competitive market where landscaper down the street is not arbitrarily charging 25% more for fill in the blank reason, bam, you've lost it right there. And you did it trying to do good in your mind, but you're not paying attention to how that's going to be perceived. What message does that send to your customers? And it loses a little bit of that magnanimousness in that example, because you could be the business owner saying, I'm going to donate a portion of my proceeds to this nonprofit, but I'm asking you to pay for it directly by paying extra. Well, then I'm not really donating it, am I? I'm asking you to donate. That comes off very differently than I'm choosing to take a hit myself. I am reducing my revenue to donate. That makes me look magnanimous. My saying, I'm going to stand back here and make exactly the same amount of money, I'm just going to make everybody else pay for this. That is not magnanimous. So hope that was interesting as kind of a perspective to bear in mind. A lot of what I do on websites is to think through this process and to anticipate how stuff is going to come off to people and how we can avoid alienating, because when it comes to optimizing for conversion, that kind of stuff makes a huge difference if you really nail it down. And so I'm just thinking in those terms a lot of the time. And I know this discussion really wasn't directly about SEO, but I think it matters as far as just sharing things that I've learned over the years in business that will be helpful to other business owners. This stuff that I've said about invoicing, you may not have really thought of at that level before, but like I said earlier, one thing can happen in isolation and might not seem like a big deal, but when there's a whole bunch of them stacked together, like that example of the company that I was working with, that it's, if you're making me pay for your credit card processing fees and you're sending me a last minute invoice with same day requirement of payment before you've actually even settled on the product that you're delivering to me being finalized, all of that stuff in succession sends the message you are all about the money, and that's what's really important here. And you work on your own timetable, and whenever the hell you feel like you're ready, everybody else snap to and just do it and just produce the money. That might not be the message you wanted to send, but that's the message that was sent. And so be conscious of this kind of stuff. All right, guys, send me your questions in the comments below or to the inquiry email on my channel and see if I can answer them that way or address it in a future video. And otherwise, I will catch you guys in the next one.